Hello everyone and welcome to our Project Insight Project Training webinar. The topic for today is managing project budgets for professional services. Just a few things to note before we get started. All participants will be put on mute. However, any questions you have are more than welcome. Please go ahead and type those into your question box, which you can find on your GoToWebinar dashboard. We will try to answer all of your questions during the session, but if we can't, we'll make sure to get to you through email before the end of the day, or you can also feel free to email us your questions at info@projectinsight.net. Also, do know this webinar recording will be available within our Project Insight community. My name is Denise, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'm on the marketing team here at Project Insight. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to reach me at denise.rodriguez@projectinsight.com. Our presenter and trainer for today will be Angie Smith. She is our partner out in Canada, and she is also PNP certified. Some of the benefits of today's webinar is to understand the purpose of additional financial columns offered and learn how to become more profitable as an organization. On our agenda today, we'll go over and explain the financial summary, proposed, billable, and invoice columns. We'll set up a quick selection with the financial columns you care about. We use the freeze panes to view extended information, and we'll also run advanced recovery and profitability reports. So with that said, I'm happy to hand this over on to Angie to continue the rest of today's webinar. Welcome, Angie.
Thank you, Denise. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show my screen. One moment here. Okay, so everybody should be seeing the Project Insight dashboard. Now, project management comes in various forms for various reasons in organizations, and different types of projects require different management processes. For example, if you are managing internal-facing projects where your clients are the different departments in your organization, you will have a different set of requirements than organizations that are managing external client or professional services projects. Now, professional services projects need to track things like high-level target budgets, detailed plan versus actual budgets, client agreed to payment milestones, actual billable data, and invoice data. And Project Insight has functionality designed specifically for managing professional service type projects. Now, before you get started managing professional service projects, there is a configuration option that needs to be turned on. It is called the proposed hours and totals. Now, these data fields enable you to track proposed hours at different incremental steps along the way in the project. And you must be a system administrator to turn this option on. So to do that, expand your left navigation, click on the administration section to expand it out. We want to click on the project section to expand that out. And that also takes us to our project settings form. And in here, there is an option called proposed hours and total. So you want to make sure that if you're doing professional service type projects, that you click on that to enable proposed hours, rate, cost, and total values for your projects and tasks. And then, of course, make sure that you click on Save. And then once you've got that turned on, you now have the columns of data that you can use to manage those proposed budgets. So let's click on our administration section to collapse all that because we don't need it anymore. And let's click on our folder section to expand that out because you're going to go ahead and add a professional services project. So let's go to our projects folder and add a project by hovering on the add icon and selecting project. And our standard project add edit form appears. Now at this point we can go ahead and collapse our left navigation again so that you have more room to work with. And we'll want to go ahead and enter a project name such as Software Development Project for Customer ABC. Then we're going to click in the drop-down for the Copy From template, and you can see that there are a number of different templates that are set up. and we're going to choose the software development template. Now, creating and using project templates is covered in more detail in the training session called Create and Reuse Project Templates. But just as an overview, templates are used frequently in professional services organizations, and they're a real benefit to those types of organizations. Because if you have projects where you do similar tasks each time, then you can create a template and then rapidly create a project based on that template. And that saves you a lot of time and ensures that important tasks aren't missed, and you're ensuring that your standard tasks are always in your project plan. And it also gives you a basis of estimates to work with when creating your new project. Now, on this form, the other thing you do want to have a look at is this state. So you want to make sure that you have active checked so that you can enter and track your actual time and actual expenses. If you leave it set as planning, it means just that. It is a planning project, and you won't be able to enter time or expenses against it until you make sure that you set it to active. Then you can go ahead and click Save. And if you need some more information on adding a project, you can also attend our training session called Creating Your First Project. All right, so we've saved it, and we can see that we've got our project, software development project for customer ABC. Now, because this is a professional services project, I actually want to go back and edit that because there's a little bit more information that I want to add on this project. And that's something called the target budget information. So we're going to go ahead and click on this tab up here called Target Budget Information. Now, the target budget information is covered in more detail in the training session called Managing Your Project Plans versus Actual. However, one field on the target budget is very important to professional services, and that is this target budget billable total field. And this is where you're going to record how much you are planning to bill the customer for this project. And at this point in your life cycle, during the project creation, this is usually a very high level or top-down number. Perhaps your sales and marketing team had some estimates that they spoke with the customer about, and you want to record those estimates. Maybe someone in your organization who has a lot of experience doing these types of projects thinks that the project should be worth a certain amount, so that might be the estimate. This might even be used to record the budget the customer has for this project or what they have told you they are willing to pay. So where and how you get this number is going to depend on your different business processes. So we're going to enter in maybe $100,000 because that's what the sales and marketing team estimated and communicated to the client that they thought this was probably going to cost. Now, you could enter a further breakdown of this $100,000 with hours here and rates, average rates, and expenses as well if you wanted to. But you don't have to do that. And it's not really necessary because the detail won't come from these values. The detail is going to come from your detailed work breakdown structure, your schedule. So this is the place that you want to just record high-level target budget billable or top-down billable budgets. And you want to do that so that you can compare those with your detailed project budget later on. And, you know, it might be a little bit before those get developed, but that's the end goal. Now, you also have this one called target budget, and there's also a total for that as well. And these are the high-level cost estimates for this project. So again, you may enter this, but in a lot of cases, especially for professional services organizations, you may just leave this data blank. So for now, we're just going to leave it blank. Now, it's important to understand that this target budget billable total is never going to change unless you, as the project manager, changes it. It is a static data field that you can use to record expectations about the project and use it for comparison and reporting purposes as the project progresses. All right, so now we're going to go, and once we've entered that data value, we want to go back to our Save icon. But instead of clicking right on Save, we're just going to hover on the icon and click the sub-menu called Save and Display Project. And what you're going to see here is your project, and it's already got a number of tasks already in it because we created this project from a template, and these would have been the tasks that were set up in that template. So you can see we have our scope and our analysis and software requirements and design and development and so on. So we're going to go ahead and click on the arrow next to our first summary task, which is the scope, to expand that out. And that's a very common navigation technique in Project Insight, is clicking on that arrow. And once you do that, it's going to expand it out, and you see all of the child tasks or the detailed tasks that are required to complete the scoping stage of this project. Now, on this task list view that you're looking at right now, there really is no financial data displayed except these work hours. And if we hover on the blue header bar, we can drag our work hours column a little bit wider or smaller, so you can see, here's our work hours. And the work hours are the amount of time or effort that you think it will take the resource to complete the task. So for our determined project scope task, we have 20 work hours defined, and we also have the resource assigned to it as well. And if you click on that resource name, it brings up our resource layer. And even though like on our main task list, we're only showing work hours for that one task, in the background, there are costing and billing rates assigned to the resource, so Jill Project, that's doing this work. So we've got a cost, or we also call it a burden rate, of $70 per hour, and also a bill rate of $100 per hour. Now again, where those rates come from is covered in more detail in the training session called Managing the Project Plan versus Actuals. So you can go ahead and watch that. I think we just had it on Tuesday. It was actually that training session, but that was recorded and it'll be in our product training video. So you can go watch that session if you need a little bit more information on that. But basically, just generally, Project Insight uses these costing and billing rates and multiplies it by the work hours to get the financial data. So let's go ahead and click Close to close that resource layer. Now the thing is, if you are looking at financial data for a project, you want to be able to display that financial data so it's easily viewable right on this display. So to change the columns of data that appear on your task list, go ahead and click on the Display Options icon. Then you want to click on this Column Selection Options section to expand it out if it's not already. So in this case it's expanded, but if it looked like this, you just have to click on that blue header bar and it expands it out. And this is where you set the columns of data that you want to appear. And again, you're going to see this used throughout Project Insight, so once you learn how to use this once, it'll be very familiar to you. Now when a new project is created, it uses a planning view. That is one of the system defaults views to display your task list information. Also, though, your system administrator may have created a default view for your organization, and in that case, that will be the view that is used. But if you look here, if I just, again, I can click on the blue header bar of this display options layer and drag this around on my screen. But, I can see here's the data columns that are our default data columns. Now you can also create your own view of the financial columns that you care about and save it as a quick selection, so that's always available for you to easily choose. So to do that, you want to have a look at this selected columns section. And first, so this is the selected columns are what are showing currently. And you'll want to remove any columns of data that you don't need for financial management. So, if you're doing your scheduling, you'll create like a scheduling view. But if you're doing financial management, you'll probably just want to concentrate on that financial management data. So we can move some of the other fields that maybe pertain more to scheduling. So we're going to just do things. We're going to double click on the duration to remove it, and the start date and the end date, and also the predecessors to remove those from our current view because those aren't important to us when we're doing financial planning. Then we're going to click on our resources column, which is still there, because we're going to insert our new financial columns just before that. So now over in the available columns section, we can click anywhere in there and then type in the letter W, and that'll take us directly to all the fields that start with the letter W instead of having to scroll all the way through this list, because this is a fairly long list of data elements that are available. Now we're going to look for something called the work billable rate, and we're going to double click on that to move it over to our selected columns. Then we're also going to double click on work billable time, work billable expenses, and work billable total. Then we'll go ahead and click the update display icon. Then again, we can just hover in the header bar and just drag the fields a little bit wider so we can see just not the data elements but the full labels as well. Now the work billable rate here is the billable rate assigned to this task and resource. So again, if we click on Jill project to bring up the resource layer, we can see that billing rate here is $100 per hour for Jill. And if we click the X to close that, we'll see that work billable rate appearing here as well. Now, if you have more than one resource working on a task, so I'm just going to expand this because I know this one here, we've got 2 resources working on this task, and if they each have different rates, then the rate displayed here on our work billable rate data, it can't show both rates. So what it does is it shows an average calculated rate. And it gets that by looking at I'm going to click on the resources to bring up that resource layer. It looks at the billable rate for Andrea and multiplies it by the number of work hours assigned to her. Looks at the billable rate for Jill, multiplies that by the number of work hours for her, adds that all together to get the total dollar value, and then divides it by the total number of work hours, so 12 in this case, and that gives us this average rate that's displayed here. All right, so let's go ahead and click that X to close that layer. So we basically get our work billable rate. Then we have our work billable time, and that's the value of the labor, or what we call in Project Insight the work billable time. And again, if it's got just one resource, it takes the work hours assigned to that task, multiplies it by the rate, which will be the same as the billable rate for that resource, and then gives us our total value of our labor. If there's 2 resources, it does that calculation I just explained, or alternatively, you get the same exact result if you take the 12 hours times it by that average rate, and you get the work billable time for that as well. Then you also have this field called work billable expenses. So this is the non-labor cost amount that you're going to bill to the client. Now this work billable time, this is calculated, and the work billable rate also comes from a rate flow. So you don't enter those in on your actual project plan in most cases. Sometimes you might enter in the rate, but normally you're only going to enter in the work hours, and then this work billable time will be calculated. But the work billable expenses, they are something that you enter in. So if we go in and click the edit icon, and we're going to go ahead and do that for this define preliminary resources where there is no work billable expense entered right now. So click the edit icon. Then we can click in that work billable expense field, and we can type in what we think we're going to bill the client for expenses for this project. So let's put in $2,500. And then we click on the save icon to save that. So now what happens is it takes the amount of time that we have calculated for a task, adds in those expenses, and that gives us a work billable total. So this is the total amount that we think that you're going to bill, or that you should be billing the client for this task. And that's a common formula that's used for financial data and Project Insight. Now in the training session for professional services, the billable data is focused on, but these same data fields are available for costs as well. So you'll have like a work rate, a work time, a work expense, and work total, and also for some other financial metrics that you're going to see in a moment. Now these work billable data elements start to build up our budget that you should use as the reference for billing your client. And it could be as simple as that. is you can take this value that comes from your work breakdown structure, sorry, this one over here in our total, and again, if you look at the individual, these are the individual costs per task, but those roll up into a summary task, and then they also roll up into the total for the entire project. So if you go in and create a project and you choose it from a template, you could actually use this value. Of course, you might make some modifications to the work hours to reflect that specific project, and maybe you might need to add some more tasks or maybe even remove tasks. But then you see you can have a work billable total, so what you should be billing the client based on your billing rates and billable expense amounts. And you could say, oh, that's what I'm going to bill the client. I'm going to bill them $90,310 because that's the value that I got from doing a detailed work breakdown structure and a bottom-up estimate. Now, so you could say that's what you've agreed to. But professional organizations also usually do milestone billing. So you may bill after each major phase, and you bill all that work for the client in that phase. For example, you may have an agreement with the client to bill for like the scoping work after all the tasks in here are complete. So if that's the case, then what you want to do is you do want to record the agreed to billable amount in separate fields than what you're seeing here, because it is possible that your project may change over time as things happen on the project, because as we all know, things always happen on projects. So you do want to make sure that you're going to record what you're agreeing to bill the client. And it could be, like I said, you could just agree, here's the total amount you're going to bill, maybe there's no incremental billings, but in most cases you do have some incremental billings. So to show the field that we want to record, if you're doing incremental billings, not just one total billing at the end of the project, so you want to record in your project plan what those incremental billings are going to be, what we need to do is just turn on that column display. So we're going to go back to our display options, and in our selected columns, we're going to click on resources because we want to insert our new column again just before that. Then this time we'll just scroll down because we're going to go right down to the fields that start with the letter P. And we can see we've got this proposed expense, hours, rate, time, and total. So remember at the beginning of this session, you turned on the option for proposed hours and proposed totals. So these are those fields. If you hadn't turned that option on, then these fields would not appear. So what we're going to do is we're going to put on our standard display here behind us is the proposed hours, the proposed rate, the proposed time, the proposed expenses, and finally the proposed total. And then we'll go and click on our update display icon. And so now we've got some new columns of data showing here. So again, we can expand those out a little bit bigger, and I'll maybe just pull our task name a little bit smaller. There we go, so we can kind of see everything on here. So you don't want to record, or normally, I mean, you could do this, maybe some organizations do this, but you usually record proposed values at a milestone or it's a milestone level. And for example, if you had like a milestone payment that was due when the scope is complete, you could make this scope complete task your milestone task and record the proposed billing data against that. And then that amount that you're recording would be the billing amount that you're doing for all of the tasks in this scoping section. So what we can do is, first of all, is set our scope complete task to a milestone task if it's not already. So to do that, right-click on the scope complete task. We want to hover on the Edit Task inline and select Advanced Options. And then we want to make sure that this option here, Milestone, is checked. So it already is on this project, and again, that's That's because that was built into the template. So somebody's already recognized that this is what you're going to be doing and pre-built that into the template so your project manager doesn't have to change it every time. So check this on, if it's not already checked, to designate this task as a milestone and save that. And that way you can easily run milestone task reports and you can see those billing details. Now the second best practice is that on a task where you are recording the proposed billable amounts, you want to make sure that in our work hours, you have 0 work hours in here. Because you don't want any work hours or billable rates or even like expenses or anything like that recorded against this task. You just want this task to house the proposed billing information. And that's just going to make sure that there's no confusion with the data. So your next step is going to be to enter those proposed billing amounts. So we can click on our edit icon, or alternatively, we can actually double click anywhere on the white space on the line to go into edit mode. So let's do that. So that puts us into edit mode, which is reflected by that light gray line or light blue line. And then we're going to click in our proposed hours. So in here you could enter in the total work hours that were calculated for the summary task. So we can see that again right here. We can see we've got 64 hours in total for all of these child tasks to get our scope summary task. So the work hours at the summary task level, you could just enter those in as well right here. And you do that if you're going to enter the exact, like if you're going to do exactly what your work breakdown structure is, you're going to bill the client exactly that, then just enter in those hours because that data is already there for you. It's already been calculated for you. And then in the proposed rate, this is going to be an average rate. So again, it's displayed right here. So this is the average rate based on all of the details below that. So we're going to put in 98.75. And then if we tab out of that, it takes us to the proposed time. And we could do some data entry in here. But if you leave that blank, then the system's going to calculate the time automatically for you by taking the hours and timesing it by the rate. Then again, in the proposed expenses, we're just going to get our total for our scope, so our 3,900. And the proposed total, this is not editable because this field is automatically calculated. You can't do any data entry in that field. So just leave that, but go ahead and click the Save icon. So then what that does is it automatically calculates our time by taking our proposed hours by our proposed rate and giving our proposed time, which again matches our work billable time that was calculated automatically for our scope summary task. And then adds in our 3,900, again, it's matching up here and then giving us a total. So the work billable total for our scope is matching our work billable total calculated down here as our proposed total billable value that we're going to bill the client when the scope complete task is done. So those proposed billable amounts in this scenario match exactly the values from your bottom-up budget. So they basically match what has been calculated for your scope summary task. Now that's a really good way to get your client billable amounts because it is based on detailed tasks, work hour estimates, and your predefined billing rates. However, even though this is a bottom-up billable budget, it may not be what you agree to bill the client. Maybe billable amounts for each milestone were determined from outside your project management department or your project management processes, and you are just given those values and you need to record them and manage them. Perhaps there was a predefined contract or agreement that the values came from. Or also, it could just be a simple case of rounding up, especially if your work billable total gets calculated with a number of dollars and cents and not a nice round number. So this is actually kind of a nice round number. It's 10,220. I mean, that's not a bad number, but when you start doing things like these average rates, like and you get things like this 93.33, and you can get some numbers in here like, $10,221.13. So in those cases, that might look a bit strange for your client, so you will do some rounding up. And, like for even in this case, we could say, let's round this up. Sorry, here, let me change that. You might want to round this up to $10,500 or maybe even $11,000. And you may also want to build some contingency in at this point. So maybe your practice is to build in a 10% contingency. So you can do that as well. Now, to show how all that works, let's click our edit icon again to go back into edit mode. And you can still do, excuse me, some calculations and figure out what you should set the proposed hours to and the proposed rate to get a proposed time with either that contingency built in or rounded up. Like maybe we'd want to say, let's change this to 70 hours and $100 an hour, and that gives us a this hasn't been updated yet because I haven't saved it, but that'll give us like $7,000 instead of $6,320. So you can go in and change your hours and rates to get more of a rounded number or to build in that contingency. But in a lot of cases, you're not going to do that. So you can actually leave the proposed hours and the proposed rate blank. And in that instance, you just want to type in a proposed time. So let's type in, let's bump this up to, let's do this, 6,500. So instead of 6,320, we're going to just say, okay, it's 6,500 for the labor. So we're going to, add a little bit of contingency in there, not too much in this case. And then let's also do this for expenses. So we could say instead of 3,900, let's just round that up to $4,000 for non-labor expenses, and then click Save. And then that gives us a more rounded number of 10,500 and a little bit of contingency built in there as well, over top of what our proposed or what we should be billing the client based on our detailed work breakdown. Sorry, let me try that again. Based on your detailed work breakdown structure. So in this case, when we've added a little bit of contingency, did a little bit of rounding, our proposed total for the scope activities is now a little bit more than our work billable total, or what was calculated from that detailed WBS. So you can put in basically as little or as much data as you want in these proposed amounts. Now, essentially, you just want to make sure that this proposed total is the correct amount and, break it down from there if you require. So if you don't need any kind of a breakdown, like you don't even want to separate time or expenses, then you could just, again, erase even the time, the labor, and just put the total value in expenses. So let's just say maybe we're going to put in like 11,000, and then that makes our proposed total 11,000. And you're not even worrying about any of this other thing. You're just worrying about this total. So to make it simple, just put the total amount into the proposed expense. Now, Project Insight's going to remember that this is the view that you are using, and the next time you display the project, it is going to display with this view. However, you may change this view, or you may want this view to apply to different projects. So you want to actually save this view so you can easily switch to it. So once you've set up your financial view, then let's go ahead and save it. So click on the display options. Then in this quick selection, we're going to click the edit icon because we're going to add in a new quick selection. Then we're going to type in, we're going to call it billing milestones. And we'll click the save icon to save that view. Now, if you click in the drop-down for the quick selection, you can see that there are some different views that are available. So we have our default view. That's what we started out with. We also have a planning view, and we also have a summary view, a financial summary view. Now, these are default views that are built into the system, but the billing milestones is a view that you created. So you could switch it back to the default view if you wanted to really easily, but then also switch it back to our billing milestones view very quickly, and then click the update icon just to have that view applied. So you can see how you can change views very easily depending on what you're doing. And so in this case, it's going to be the view that you're going to use for your billing purposes. Now, the data you're seeing is your planned project billable amounts. And this is what you think the project's going to take. And it's again, we reference that with the term work billable. And then the amount you're going to bill the client, or what you're agreed to bill the client, and that's the proposed data. So it is possible as the project progresses, your work hours may have to be adjusted, or you might have to add in additional activities. And of course, you hope that's never going to happen, but as we all know, that managed projects, it could happen. And it might happen for different reasons as well. Maybe you assign a senior resource, so instead of 20 hours, it's only going to take 10, or you assign a junior resource, it's going to take 40. So there's lots of reasons why that might occur. So let's go ahead and see what happens if we do that. So we're going to double click on our determine project scope, and we're actually going to change that to 40. So we think that it's actually going to take 40 hours instead, but we don't find that out till a little bit later on after we've agreed to bill the client, the 11,000. So you can see that our work billable total has changed. It's actually been bumped up to 12,220 now. So it's actually more. So this is actually now going to take us more than what we've agreed to bill the client. So that is why you do want to record these proposed amounts, like what you have agreed to bill the client, even if it was going to be the same originally as this work billable total and you didn't add in any contingency or you didn't round it. You do want to record that because this could change as the project progresses. Now also as the project progresses, your team is going to start recording your actual time against the project. So remember, this is your planning time, but as they actually start to do the work, they're going to start tracking the actuals. And that's all covered in our other training session called Track Your Time and Enter Your Expenses. So there's a number of different ways that you can enter time, but in this case we're just going to see one way, and that's the way that you can do it right from within this task list view. So to add in some hours for determine project scope, we're going to go ahead and click on that. And then our task detail form appears. And we're going to click on the Time tab, and we're going to enter in our actual hours. So in this case, we're going to enter in 6 hours that we worked today on this task. And because I'm actually logged in as a project manager on this project, I'm seeing some extra data when I'm doing this time entry. So I'm seeing like this thing called actual rate and the billing hours and billing rate. But your team members aren't going to see those data fields. They're only going to see the actual hours and the description and possibly this is billable option. So we do want to click this is billable option because this work is going to be billable to the client. And again, there's some settings that can be set up for the project that this is always checked by default. And those are covered in some of the setup training sessions that we have. But basically if it is billable, you want to make sure this is checked or leave it checked if it's checked by default. And then we're going to click Save. And I'm getting a message here. It says the time entry could not be added because the time code consulting does not allow billable entries. So I need to actually go ahead and change that. Let's do programming. I think that's a billable time code. All right, so that's saved that. And I can actually go in and enter another 2 hours. And I could say that that's not billable. So maybe, there was some extra work that we can't really justifiably bill the client for. So we still want to record those actuals because we want to know how much this is really taking us overall, but we have to differentiate it from being billable to the client and not being billable. And let's go ahead and save that. So we've got 2 time entries, 1 billable and 1 not. So we can see our actual hours total is 8, but our billing hours is actually only 6. Now that same theory applies to expenses. So if we click on the Expenses tab, and again, I'm seeing some extra data columns because I am the project manager. But let's go in and enter in $500 for the actual cost and leave the is billable checked and save that. And then enter another 200 and uncheck the is billable and save that as well. All right, so once you've entered in some actuals, you can click on the Views menu option to return to the task list, and it remembers the last view that you set for this project and displays that. But we're going to go ahead and add in some additional data here. We're going to put in those actual columns of data so we can now actually see the actuals on our view as well. So let's go back to our display options, and we're going to go to the resources here. And our actuals are right here at the top because they start with the letter A. So we're going to click on actual hours and actual expense, and then update that. So this is where you can start to see now, and I'm just going to scroll over a little bit. You can start to see the actual hours that were entered and the actual expenses that were entered. And you can see some other data here as well, such as rates and totals and so on, but that's the costing data. Now, since this is a client-facing project, you are going to concentrate on the billables data for now. All right, so we're going to add in, go back to our display options. In this case, we're going to go to the section that's billable. So again, the actuals, that's costing amounts. But if we go to billables, that's the billable. So what you're actually billing the client. So again, it's actuals, not planned values, it's actual values. So we're going to pull in, and I'm going to stick it right before resources again. So we're going to pull in our billable hours, our billable rate, our billable time, our billable expenses, and our billable total. And then we're going to update our display. Now, a couple of things here. You know, our display is starting to get pretty big. So I'm actually going to right-click on our name, and I'm going to freeze the header in the left pane. So that way it keeps my task list displayed, but I can start scrolling over and see all of the data elements here. So let's go down and get our scroll bar. So now we're starting to see our billable hours, our billable rate, our billable time and expenses, and then also our total. So actual, that's our costing to us, and then the billable is what we're going to bill the client, and that's the actuals. So again, we can see that for actual hours, there's 8 total hours entered, but we're only billing the client 6. And the billable expenses, the actual expense was 800, but we're only billing the client 500. And so that's giving you some true metrics, like what the cost was versus what the billable was. And then you also have your billable total to date. Now, Project Insight does allow you to put any approved time and expenses onto invoice reports and export that to your accounting system. And that's all covered in detail in our training session called Generating Invoices and ERP Integration. However, you will see how to display that invoice data on your project. So this one's got a few time entries on it, but if we click on our display options icon, and again, if we look at our available columns, we can go down to our information that starts with I. And so this is our invoiced metrics. So if you've actually gone and created like an invoice in Project Insight, and that's not an invoice, like it's an invoice to house all the data that made up that invoice, and you went and put in this section because we invoice the client for that section, then you're actually able to see those invoiced values as well. So it is possible that your invoiced amounts, again, are different than some of the other data that you've got. So you might have your work breakdown structure rolls up and you've got those elements, but what you're actually invoicing the client might be a little bit different. And so we could put these invoiced amounts on here as well, and I'm going to, again, stick them just before resources. And it's following that same scenario, is that you have the hours times it by the rate, and that gives you your amount of your labor. Then you add in your expenses, and the labor plus the expenses gives you the invoice total. And we can update our display. And again, I have to scroll down a little bit to see my scroll bar here. Now you start to see any of your invoiced amounts as well. And so, of course, I haven't actually physically done the invoicing for these actuals that I've entered in, but you can see that once you start to do that, you're going to start to see the invoiced amounts as well. So you've got all these financial metrics about, what you plan to bill, what the actuals were, but also what you invoiced. Now, another thing, if you've got a lot of data on here, not only can we freeze our header and left panes, and again, all I did was right-click on the blue header bar to get that option. And when you do the freeze header and left panes, you want to do the right-click on the column that you want to freeze. So I wanted to freeze it on the name column, so I right-clicked on that name column and then selected the freeze header and left panes. And then you can, no freeze or freeze just the header, but you can also toggle to the full screen. So if we do that, you'll see that it gets rid of all the Project Insight logos and all that kind of thing and gives you even more screen real estate that you can start working with this project. And if you right-click, and actually you can double-click too, and that'll switch things, but you can right-click and toggle full screen as well. And let's see here, I double-click, so let's double-click. Yeah, and it's got me stuck here in, let's unfreeze first of all. There we go, and that'll take us back. All right, so again, we've been kind of talking about all of this data at a task level, but we did, talk about the fact that, it all rolls up, all the tasks roll up to your summary tasks. So you don't want to be putting any resources or anything against a summary task. You want to let all the values in the summary task be rolled up from the child tasks. And then it also rolls up again to your project level. And again, if we scroll here, we can see all those financial metrics rolled up to the project level. So you can view all of that information here on the task list, but you can also view it on the project status form. And that might be a view that your executives prefer instead of looking at this detailed task list review. Although, if you collapse your scope task, it gives you a pretty simple high-level view of the financial data. But to get an even higher level view of it, let's go to the Views menu option and click on Status. Then we're going to click on our Budget tab. And the first column displayed on here, there's three columns. There's what the value is, then there's the costing or actuals, and then the billable. So, Project Insight always separates out what the cost is to the organization and what the billable is to the client. And again, we're going to focus on this billable amount in this training session. So you can see here down at the very bottom, we've got our target budget billable, which was that high-level target budget amount you entered when you first created the project. Then you can see you also have your work total billable, or that's what the total value of the project was that expected to be billed based on your billing rates and based on a detailed work breakdown structure. So it's a little bit different. We've got 100,000 that we started with, but 92,310 that came from the WBS. Then you can also see your proposed totals, which is down here. So this is those proposed total amounts that you entered for each of your milestone tasks all added up. So in this case, we're actually got an even different value, which is 113,300. So, here's our right here, our detailed work breakdown structure estimate, our high-level estimate when we first started the project, and then when we created our detailed work breakdown structure and we added in some contingency, we actually came up with a value of this one here. So they're all different values. Now you do actually have, and I know I keep saying actuals for actuals, but here's the line that shows you what are the actual totals that have been entered in to date. And in the early stages of the project, there's going to be a big variance here because not a lot of work has been done. So when you look at the actuals versus the work billable amounts here above, in terms of profitability, The actuals are what you've done to date versus the work billable total, which is what you plan to do for the entire project. Now, there are also planned and earned value metrics that can be used for measurements while the project is in progress. So this will give you a little bit more true reflection of where you are as the project is going on versus these ones are more for totals at the end when you start looking at those. And again, these aren't populated because this project was just created and ready to start on this date. Now, all of this data is available at your portfolio level. So if you click on Reports and click on Create Project Report, well, you want to make sure you click on Project first and then Create Project Report. Then go to the column selection options to expand that out. And again, I can move this around a little bit so I can see this whole form. And again, you've got like all the same data elements. This is at a project level, so it's showing you all the data elements that are available to you for the project. And what we're going to do is we're just going to get rid of most of this kind of standard data that's there. So we're just going to leave the name. So I'm going to get rid of indicators and number, and then I'm going to highlight all the rest of them and click the leftover to remove them. So I'm just left with the name in my selected column. But in my available columns, I'm going to go to my work total and double click on that. Then I'm going to go to my work billable total. So remember, these are, this is what the planning and what we thought the cost was. The work billable total is when we planned this out. We thought this is what we should be billing the client. Then we're going to go find our proposed total. Double click on that. And that's what you agreed to bill the client, basically, for each milestone. Then you have your actual total, so what the actual amounts were, and the billable total. So again, this is costing. This is billable, what you're going to bill the client based on the actual hours and actual expenses that were entered in. And then finally, we have the invoice total. And that's the actual labor and hard costs that have been put on an invoice that's going to be generated for the customer. Now, you might also want to add in some profit data. So let's go down to our profit section, and there's a number of different profit figures that you can pull in and put on your report. Let's put in profit actual. And if we click on that, we can actually click on the Show Tooltip, and that'll tell you what this is. So you can click on that Show Tooltip to see what all of these different ones are. And let's click OK. And you can also put in recovery billable percents as well. So there's some here. So let's put that in and put in our actual profit actual. And if you want to reorganize these, if you forget to tell Project Insight where you want to put them, just click on it and click on the up and down arrows to reposition it. And again, recovery billable, you can show the tooltip so you can see where that calculation is coming from. And it's basically the target billable total. So what we entered at that high level divided by the work billable estimate at completion. So it does do estimate at complete calculations as well. And if we go ahead and run that report, again, you can start to see all those elements on a project report. So you can see your recovery billable percentage. And this has it for each individual project because this is a project report, but it also rolls it up so that you've got a recovery billable percent that's for your entire portfolio. And again, what you could do is you could actually save this report, and then your executives could put it on their dashboard, so it's the first thing that they see when they log into the system. Now, there are other professional services type reports that you might find useful, and we don't have enough time to kind of cover those and all of those in these training sessions, but I can show you a couple of them so you get an idea of what's available and you can build them yourself. So if we click on reports, and again we want to go to our project reports section, and I'm going to click on my saved reports to expand that out. And all the reports in here are professional services reports if they start with this PS at the beginning. So I'm going to click on Client Actual Profit to run that. And what this does, it actually shows 2 graphs. So you are able to put up to 4 different graphs on a single report. And this first one here is a bar chart, and it shows by your customer the actual profit, the actual total. So we don't have any for customer ABC, but we've got some down here for customer DEF, and the target billable total. So again, since these projects are in progress, the actuals are still relatively low compared to what we're targeting that we're going to be billing basically at the end. Now the second chart is a pie chart that shows a breakdown of projects by your status so that you can see really quickly whether or not you might have some projects in trouble. So we can see there's actually one in a caution phase. And then finally, if we scroll down a little bit, what we also see is the data that's making up these charts and graphs. It's showing in a tabular report, so we can also see that as well. And so that's a nice way that you can display some data for your executives. All right, and if we go back to reports again, we've got some other, we have a fixed price performance for current quarter. And if we click on that, it'll show us a chart of the target budget billable, or what you originally thought you would bill the client, versus the work billable estimate at completion, which is what it looks like you're going to bill the client based on the current project status. And again, you've got your tabular, you've actually got your data below that showing, so what the data is that's making up these charts or graphs. And we'll have a look here, just 1 or 2 more before we wrap this up, because we're coming to the end of our session. So let's have a look at our fixed price projects. And again, this is the same kind of data except from a costing perspective. So what you initially thought it would cost versus the new project costs at completion. And some of these they're fairly normal, except this couple uncategorized. There's work estimate at completion is way over what we thought we were going to target. So we should probably have a look at that. And again, we could go down here and expand out that uncategorized section and then start drilling down to the actual projects and getting that information. And one last report. Which one did we just do? We did the cost versus, let's do this, cost budget versus actual. So that gives you what your costing budget is versus your actual. And then actually I'm going to show you one more, which is our planned profit as well. So this report can help you with your planning, because you can see what projects are anticipated to give you the highest profit amount. So you could focus, if you are lacking some resources or whatever it may be, you could focus on the ones that are giving you the highest planned profit amount. And so those are some examples of some professional services reports that you run. And of course, you can access all those once you've got them created. Just hover on your reports menu option, go to your project reports, and click on those to quickly run them. All right, so that brings us to the end of our agenda items for today. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this back over to Denise for some closing slides. Denise.
Thank you, Angie. All right, for those of you on social media, I'd like to invite you to follow, like, and subscribe to our social media channels. Our handle on Twitter is @ProjectInsight. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you're not already a Project Insight user and would like to learn more, please feel free to contact us via phone, email, or request your demo at projectinsight.net. In our Project Insight community, you'll find many recorded videos and webinars for you to watch and learn from. You can sign up for your next product training, project management training, or IT methodology training. That's all we have for you today. We'd like to thank Angie for a great session as usual, and of course we'd like to thank our audience for your time, and we do hope to have you on board next time. Thank you so much, and have a great day.